Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Quivs here. This is Quivs Does Stuff. Continuation of our previous video where we're sort of doing a bit of a getting started in Astroneer. That's not what this video was originally intended as. Mostly I just needed or wanted to make some content, but didn't feel like playing any of the games that I was playing in my Let's Play, and I already had this in my library, and there was a new update, the automation update. So I was A, having a look at the automation update, and B, sort of just had to start a new game because I didn't have a decent save where I could look at the automation stuff straight off the top. So now this has become a bit of a how I get started tutorial. This may not be the best way to do it, but it's the way I do it. It's the way I get started in the game and get my basic progression growing. So that's what we've ended up doing, and that's what we're going to continue to do. So in our last video we were preparing for the soil centrifuge, which we now have enough research points to research, and we should hopefully have enough resources to make. So it'll turn up here on the medium printer because the medium printer prints large things, and there it is, aluminium. So that is, as I said in the last video, laterite is sort of the second, third, fourth resource that you're going to need. It is one of the most primary resources in the game. So there are certain resources that every single planet contains, no matter what, no matter which planet it is, you'll always find those resources. And those are, you'll always find organic, you'll always find resin, you'll always find compound, you'll always find aluminium. There are more, but I'll stop there because I can't remember what the rest of the you'll always find ones are. There are more to the you will always find them. Now aluminium has to be refined before it's of any use, so we'll put that on our smelter. And what was the other thing? 2 compound. We've got 2 compound to spare here, so we'll just plonk those in so that the printer is ready. And then we'll make the most amazing, most useful machine in the entire game, in my opinion. The soil centrifuge. It's wonderful. It does so much work. And I'll show you why once we've got one. It shouldn't take long, we just have to wait for this to finish. Now again, I said in the previous video, power is important and your shelter produces a basic amount of power. So do any, what's the word, spaceship that you make. They produce a basic amount of power, but without actual power producing machines that you slot onto tables, in most cases slot onto tables, you're limited by how much power is produced. And you can actually tell how much power that is sort of by the amount of yellow on the cable. See, that's a fairly thin stripe. It's not as thin as the oxygen one, which is just to let you know there's oxygen. But the more power you produce, the bigger that stripe actually becomes to let you know when something is fully powered. And all machines will do whatever they need to do faster or slower, depending on how much power there is available. The more things that are doing something, the less power there is available for the other machines as well, because the power is shared across all the machines. Right, so now, aluminium resource. Oh, sorry, just burping from this coffee that I've been drinking. And we'll construct our soil centrifuge. Now, while that is working, I'm going to go back down here. See, sliding, it's much faster. And I'm going to do... Well, first I'm going to gather this because it's there, which means that the other ones will also be regrown. So I'll go over here and grab these 2 because, hey, why not? It's good to have lots and lots and lots of research points, bytes, as the game calls them. Now, we've descended into the planet. It's like, yeah, cool, we descended into the planet, we found aluminium, that was a cool new resource that we didn't have before, blah, 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 blah. But, doesn't mean we have to stop going down. Ooh. That's a research item. Lucky to find that. Alright, well, I'm not going back to the surface just now because I was about to do something, so we'll do that after. So I'm going to drill into this wall a little bit. Give myself a little bit of a sort of landing pad. Then we're going to descend yet again. So I make a little hole, find a point on the wall of this that's sort of around the steepness of the descent I want. hit control to level, and then we'll start descending again. Very slowly inch down until the tether breaks, and then place a new tether. And then we can descend, making a ramp down into the dark. Now, why am I doing this? Well, the deeper you go, there are actually resources that aren't found in the early sort of cavern levels. You actually have to descend very, very far into the planet. And also, the end game of this game is very, very deep in the planet. I won't say any more because that's entering spoiler territory. I suppose it's not that important, but for now, let's just not spoil it. If you descend far enough, you'll find different things. We'll cover that when we get to it. We will eventually get to it. Oh look, it's ferrite light on the wall. The more you play the game, you'll come to recognize most of the resources just by their visuals. You won't have to hover the mouse over them or gather them to find out what it is. But yeah, so we're going to descend another level, see what we can see. Now the terrain will actually change depending on how far down into the planet you are. So now it's still a sort of cavern layer, but it's a bit rougher than it was before. Oh, I forgot to plant a thing there. So I'm going to level out about here because that seems appropriate. That'll give me sort of a landing point. Move this up to where it's actually connected to the previous tether. Descend slowly again until we run out and break the tether. Oops, that's about here. Yep, that's fine. Alright, so now we're on the next level down of caves, and you'll see, yeah, the terrain's a bit more random. There's a lot more ups and downs. There's more... Sometimes you'll find more enemies, sometimes you'll find slightly more difficult enemies, but not always. I'm going this way because I saw this research sample here, so I'm going to make a tether line towards that. Also a new source of aluminium if I need it. At some later point, if I run out of aluminium on that previous section, there's also this research item here. I'm going to break all these pot corals just because. See, maybe I'll get a few samples out of them. So there's definitely a seed there. Could plant these seeds, I'm not going to. I'm going to let them dissipate over time. Alright, and then I'm going to take this back. Oh. Alright, going to have to build up to that point. By doing this. Not ideal, but hey, it worked. It's fine. It's fine. That'll do it. Alright. And we're going to take this back to the surface. So I already had one, so I think it's sitting at the bottom of the ramp on the next tier level up of the caverns. But that's okay. That just means now we know that we've got two. We've got another one for when we need it. Doop doobie boo, slowly walking up the hill. Yeah, so your speed actually changes depending on the altitude of the climb, the steepness of the climb. One thing you can do is you can actually move diagonally across the slope to increase your speed. So you'll find me wiggling my way up and down a lot, and that is because by moving diagonally across the slope, you'll go a little bit faster than if you just tried to walk straight. So that's just a little trick that I use. Alright, the soil centrifuge is done. Now, let's demonstrate the most wonderful thing in the game, the soil centrifuge. And this is the second place where your canisters are going to come in handy. So I'm going to fill up the second canister because I need it. Just with some random dirt from close by. Right, we've got 2 full soil canisters. So what does the soil centrifuge do? Well, if you activate it by pressing F, it brings up this interface where it shows you all of these different resources that it can make from soil. Now, depending on how much soil you load into it, it'll make differing amounts. and 2 canisters is the maximum that the soil centrifuge can hold. But if you go here to ammonium, you'll notice that it can make 1, and that is with a full load. So it takes 2 full canisters of soil to make 1 ammonium. 1 canister of soil can make 1 graphite, 2 full soil canisters can make 2 graphite. Now graphite it's not impossible to find graphite, but it is a rare resource. It's really hard to actually find it. But it is, I believe, available on every planet. It's just that you hardly ever see it, so you will find that you will make graphite using the soil centrifuge more often than not when you need it. Quartz is pretty common, and I believe is also found on every planet. But I haven't run into any yet, so if I need any quartz, I'll probably be making it. Clay, again, I believe is available on every planet, but again, it's somewhat rare. You don't find it everywhere, so you end up making it more often than not. And that's organic. You'll rarely make organic in the soil centrifuge. But resin, it's fairly common, but you need so much of it that sometimes it's easier just to dump 2 canisters of soil into the soil centrifuge, resin and compound, and just churn out 8 quickly so that you've got them. Alright, so how do we use the machine? Well, it sort of gives you an indication of where it's got to go. Again, the little hologram here. It shows you soil required. So you take your soil canisters and you load them onto there. It empties them out into the machine. Gives you a little indicator here of how full it is. Now the machine is full. And you'll see the light is green because now we can actually make things. So what are we going to make first? I'm going to need clay. I'm going to need quartz. I'm going to need... Oh, I don't really need graphite and ammonium at the moment. I'm going to churn out some quartz because I'm going to need that soon enough. Oh, I probably should have actually made some resin. Or some compound. But oh well, I didn't. Oh yeah, so they changed the research machine. Normally when you loaded a new research item into the research chamber, you would have to restart the research chamber every time, but I guess since the automation update, they've changed that so long as you actually put it in the research machine and the research machine was set to on, it just automatically researches. Similar to the way the smelter can be turned on or off, so long as it's on, if it gets a resource, it smelts that resource immediately. So this is the soil centrifuge in action. It slowly spins and builds up the actual resources. Underneath it, it'll then, when it's finished, flip upright and unload them into any available spaces on the platform, which is why I put the 8 medium storage on this platform as well, because it gives the soil centrifuge somewhere to unload it. Now, it will use these other 2 slots sometimes as well, if they are available and these are full, for example. But later in the game, I'm going to actually be filling up all these spare 2 slots that you see around the place with other items, other machines, most likely power-producing machines. So I try to keep a medium storage next to something like the furnace, next to something like the soil centrifuge. Sometimes I'll do it for the printers as well, because it's convenient to just put the items that the printer needs onto this, rather than trying to load them into the holograms on top of the printers. But we're probably not going to be bothering to do that because that's more of a nicety than a must-have. Admittedly, this is also pretty much a nicety. If all these slots were full, it would have just stayed on the soil centrifuge and you could pick them out one by one. Now, do I need quartz for anything yet? I don't think I do. So quartz is the raw resource, glass is the refined resource when you smelt it. Got 794 research points. What else do I need to do? I think we should really begin moving towards actually getting into space. One of the things I like to do before I leave the first planet is get, and if I can find it, a small oxygen tank for your suit. Glow sticks. I've never actually used glow sticks. I believe they do serve a purpose, but I've never used them. Where is the oxygen tank? They must have moved it. And that takes a full 2,000 bytes. So that's going to take me a long time. But let's look at some of the other things you can get. So over here on the huge constructions, you'll find this is where they keep the spaceships. It's where they used to keep the spaceships. They still do. So there, small shuttle. Also takes 1,500 bytes. You want to have an oxygenator when you get to a new planet, because otherwise you can't make tethers. That's also 1,800 bytes. So the things that you need to really move on from the first planet to the next planet, we're talking thousands and thousands of bytes here, so it's going to take me a little while to gather all the bits and pieces. Now I will be slowing that down considerably by wasting my time getting the small oxygen tank, but the small oxygen tank is extremely useful. What the small oxygen tank is something that you can put on your backpack that counts as a second one of these, so you will have twice as long before you actually run out of oxygen. For exploration, that is extremely useful, so I tend to do it early and before I leave this first planet. Right, now we're going to have to get copper before we leave this planet as well, because we need, I suppose you don't have to. Let me just gather these few bits of research materials, because that's what I walked away from the base to do, and then we'll discuss power generation with reference to the research items in your backpack. Let's go over here. We haven't been over here. So I'm about halfway through my oxygen, so I want to turn around any moment now. These modules as well, let's discuss those. So these little triangular pyramidal modules, they contain research items, but they need to be unlocked, and they have different requirements for how they were unlocked. Let me grab some oxygen, we'll head back over, and I'll explain a bit more thoroughly. So wait until I've got a full tank here. And then let's head back over. Right, so on the side of this one, it has a symbol, and that symbol actually corresponds to a resource. So somewhere on one of the sides of this pod will be a single slot, and to unlock this exodynamics research aid, you need to insert the appropriate resource to unlock. How do you know what that resource is? Well, whenever there is a resource and you hover over it, it will show you its unique symbol. Every resource has its own unique symbol, shared with no other resource, including refined resources and, as you will see later in the game, compound resources. So laterite, it just so happens that that is actually the same symbol. Now I was going to say, now if you don't know what symbol it is, press escape. You can go over here to the Astropedia and hit resources. And there are several pages here of all the resources in the game, and it shows you the symbols for each resource. But it turns out that that one did just need laterite, so we'll grab this laterite and we'll go back over there and we'll open it, and we'll show you what happens when you open one of those exo research things. Now, the other symbol that you will find on them is a lightning bolt. Now, if that's a lightning bolt, that means the pod requires power. There are two power requirements for the pod. Either you just need to accumulate enough power over time for the pod to fill, or you need to provide, and there it is, a research sample. A very small one, but it's worth a lot. So with the power ones, you either just need to provide enough accumulated power over time, which means you can hook up any power producing device to it, and it will slowly fill this bar up until it's full, and then the machine will open. The other kind requires a minimum amount of power. You can sort of think of it as having enough amps. You might have to hook up numerous different kinds of power supplies to that pod to open it, because it has a minimum amount of power, or a minimum strength of power. Think of it as amps, amperage. I don't know whether you know about volts and amperage. You can think of it kind of, volts and amperage as water pressure. Volts is the amount of water. Amperage is the amount of pressure that water is under. So if you've got 10 liters and you're trying to push it through a cylinder that's 1 centimeter in diameter, that's under a lot of pressure. But if you've got 10 liters of water and you're trying to push it through a hole that is 1 meter in diameter, that 10 liters of water is going to fit in that without even touching the sides, like it's only going to sit along the bottom. That's under no pressure. Voltage and amperage is very much the same. Volts is kind of the amount that you have, and amperage is the amount of pressure that amount that you have is under. So some of the exodynamics research pod thingies, they require amps, a certain number of amps to open, and some of them require a certain number of volts to open. Right. Oh, there we are. We're already at 1,200, so that's pretty good. We are making steady progress towards the 2,000 that we're going to need to make ourselves a small oxygen tank. And because I'm going to need copper to get off this planet, I'm going to have to research the buggy as well. So we'll definitely have to do that. Oh yes, so I was going to talk to you about power producing machines or modules. Everything in the game that slots onto something is called a module. So the first thing I wanted to show you in regards to that is that some of the small modules can be placed on the ground, and they become their own little table with their own 2 cable plugs on either side. The small printer is one, and the smallest power producing modules, the small wind turbine and the small solar panel, are like that. They can be placed on the ground and they will turn into these little modules that can actually be plugged into things. Or they can fit on a single slot. So, inside here, where is it hiding? Small generator. So there is a small generator. The small generator, the medium generator, they use resources to produce electricity, and they slowly burn that resource, and then once the resource is empty, the generator produces no more electricity. The small generator runs off organic. The medium generator runs off carbon. Carbon is smelted organic. I'll smelt one now and show you when it's finished what carbon looks like. So you see it's slowly smelting that organic material and it's turning it into this black stuff, which is carbon. So those are viable, but they do continuously use resources, so they're not the preferred method of generating power. Now, where they do come in really handy is sometimes you'll find those exodynamics research pods underground, where there is no wind and there is no sun. So the only way to produce enough either amperage or voltage, depending on what the pod needs, is to do so via generators. Now there is a third kind of generator, but we won't go into that now because that's an extremely late game item, so we won't worry about it until we get to it. Alright, so that's carbon. It's just a black block. Looks good. It's refined organic. Okay, so the other kinds of generators, that's power cells. So they're one use. Once they're used up, they're gone. They're made from zinc. Like early batteries. Early batteries were made from zinc, which is why I believe zinc is that. This is the small solar. It's made from copper. I can research it now, but I'm not going to because we really need the 2000 for the... really want the 2000 for the small oxygen tank. Again, that's a personal preference. You can get by without the small oxygen tank. You can finish the game without the small oxygen tank. But I like it. Then there's the small wind turbine. Now, luckily, the small wind turbine only needs glass, and glass is just refined quartz. So they are very useful, but it does require the wind to actually be blowing. So you see the streaks across the screen now? That's the wind blowing, but in a few seconds, that wind will actually die out, and then it'll produce no power because there is no wind. That beep that you just heard was the research chamber finishing. So let's put this research sample in and see how much you actually get out of it. That's a full 1,350 bytes from that sample. So that's a lot. That'll easily take us over our 2,000 mark that we're going to need for the small oxygen tank. Where is it again? There it is. Alright. So that's sort of how power works. Now, there are bigger power producers. So there's your medium generator. Look how much that costs to research. Medium solar, medium wind turbine. Now the only one that actually comes in a large size, I believe, is the large solar panel. I don't believe there is a large wind option. There's only a large solar panel option. And it's not large, it's huge. So it actually fits into this category here. And it is found somewhere. So I'm not going to talk through all these things. There are all different things that you can make and different reasons for using them, etc., etc. So landing pad, that mostly comes into use on future planets. You don't actually need it on this first panel. There it is. The solar array. It has a lot of resource and high level resource requirements. It costs 6,250, but it produces a lot of power. The other major one, which was back here, comes in the very end of these, batteries. Batteries I didn't talk about either. There's a small battery and a medium battery. I don't think there's a large battery. They require lithium, which is a rare resource not found on this planet, so you have to travel, and also require zinc, like most batteries. So what batteries do is they will actually store charge, so store volts, when there is excess power in the system. So if you're producing more than you're using, the battery will charge, and then when you're using more than you're producing, the battery will discharge to provide extra power. And then finally, the last thing, the one that I actually came here to talk about, is the RTG. Now that stands for radioisotope something generator. I forget what it actually is, but it is something that really exists. It's used by NASA. It's used by, I believe, all the different space agencies. A lot of them use RTGs. If you've seen the Matt Damon movie The Martian or read the book, he solves the heating problem of his traversal of Mars using the RTG. Now, RTGs, they are radioactive. It's in the name. That's what they do. They use a radioactive isotope to create energy. So they are somewhat dangerous. In this game, not at all. It makes no difference. In real life, they are dangerous, and normally they use them as a power source when traveling long distances, so to the moon, to Mars, etc., etc. And then once they get there, as you would have seen if you've seen The Martian and paid attention, they actually bury it like miles away from the habitat because it's dangerous. They do give off heat because radioactive decay generally gives off heat. But in this game, they're perfectly safe. But look at it, 12,500 bytes. Requires nanocarbon alloy, which I believe is the most complex, hardest to produce material in the entire game. And lithium, which is just something that you find on planets later on. Anyway, we've got our 2,000 research points. Let's go grab that oxygen tank. Now, I should have done this before, and I didn't get around to it, but I should have actually started making glass on the smelter. Now, the oxygen tank you make off your backpack. So let's find that. There we are, small oxygen tank. So I'll wait for the glass to finish. Is there anything else I can be doing? Let's just run around and gather some research points if we can find any. Because what's the use in just standing there while we wait for something to finish? Now, I did say we're going to have to make the buggy because we're kind of pretty desperately going to need to find copper, and there just aren't any tall enough mountains to produce copper around me. It depends on your spawn point. Your spawn point is random. Sometimes the mountain will be right next to you and you can just climb up there and grab copper immediately without leaving your area. So then you wouldn't even need to produce the buggy to take your first steps into space and actually land on other planets. But in this case, I'm going to have to. And that's going to delay us somewhat. Alright, so there's the oxygen tank. You can see it fills up. I like to put it on this slot here so that I can see it. And then we'll go back to tether bundle so that that compound slips back into here and doesn't take up a backpack slot. And yeah, so now I have twice as much oxygen, which means I can go further afield without having to worry about suffocating. So you'll see that this drains before that, and these two are equivalent in size. So there was another research item over here, so I'm going to go and grab that. A few more research samples down here on these plants. On this plant. I think on that plant. Oh, nope, definitely on that plant. Alright, and there are actually 2 research samples here, so I have to remember to come back and grab the other one later as well. But for now, we'll just grab this one, we'll head home. Now, like I said, the next thing we're going to need is we're going to need the buggy, but the buggy is going to need some source of power. The problem is, I need the buggy to find copper, and the solar panel requires copper to make. But the wind turbine doesn't. So the next thing we're going to research is the wind turbine, before even the buggy, because we're going to need it. So we'll research that now, because we had enough points. Make some glass, and I'll show you what the wind turbine looks like. Now on these debris pads, tables that you find scattered around, sometimes you'll find a power item. So you'll find a working solar panel or a working wind turbine just on them. That mountain there looks like it's going to be tall enough to maybe have copper. So that's where we're going to go. I could make a tether line all the way over there, but it's really far. It's a bit of a waste of tethers, to be honest. Still got plenty of oxygen. I'm going to keep going and have a look at what is on this debris plate here. No, that's just a power. That's a shame. I don't see any copper yet, but we'll have to come over here with a buggy and look more thoroughly later. Alright, let's head home. That glass should have finished producing, and we can make our first little wind turbine. I'll show you what that looks like, how it works, what it can slot into, and like I said, a lot of the small things, and the wind turbine and the small solar panel and the small generator, they can all actually just sit on the ground as independent modules, and then that module can be used to power things by connecting it up via cables. Alright, small wind turbine, again built off your backpack. And it looks like that. There we go. See, now it's working. Now, you can actually use the small wind turbine on your backpack to actually give you power. But to do so, you either have to put it on your terrain manipulator or on these 2 slots on your backpack that are here on the top. These are called tool slots. So these only things that need to be active, they have to be in the tool slots. They won't work otherwise. So this, if I was to... Okay, let's take the power cells off because I don't need them. So let's go over here and we will kill these things. So now, it takes me power to use my terrain manipulation tool, but... Okay, now there's no wind, so now would be a good time to demonstrate. So I'll do this a few times. There's actually a research sample there. I don't want to dig that out too far. Yeah, you might have seen that little rock just disappear there. Ah. Oh no, I think the research sample one is safe. You might have seen that little rock disappear. Yeah, sometimes that happens. So these rocks are sort of set pieces, and if you dig the terrain around them, they will fall and react to physics a little bit, but eventually they will also just disappear entirely. You'll find the same with stalagmites and stalactites. Ah, okay, hopefully you were watching, but that small wind turbine there recharged my backpack. So that's how they work, that's what they're used for. They are small, they only provide a very small amount of amperage, but all the amperage that you produce is cumulative. So there's a couple of slots on the side of the shelter. I believe there's only 2, like one on each side of the door. Decent place to put a small solar panel and a small wind turbine. For now, that's where we're going to store it, because we're going to be using that later when we get the buggy. So the next thing we're definitely going to want to learn is we're going to want to learn the buggy, because we're going to need the buggy. So 1 compound, 1 aluminium. We already have the resources for it. Now we just have to wait until we have enough bytes for it. The other thing we're going to need is we're going to need a rover seat. And that is built on the small thing and requires 2 compound. Now I don't have 2 compound on me. Let's put another research material into that. So what I'm going to do is I've got a sort of holes all around the place. Here's a good one. And I'm just going to fill up my canisters. And instead of going looking for compound, I'm just going to make it in the soil centrifuge because it's easier. So we fill up the soil centrifuge with a full stack, which will allow us to make a total of 8. Go to... Now it's compound we need, not resin, although I do need resin as well, so I might do resin after this as well immediately. We'll see. Maybe I'll remember, maybe I won't. Now I do have to wait for this to finish, so that is the only downside, is that you have to wait for the soil centrifuge to finish. So when the soil centrifuge is at full power, it'll spin as fast as it did where it first began, but now it's at very minimal power. You'll see the little yellow stripe is actually thinner than it was when I spoke about it, I believe in the last video. I don't think it was this video. And that's because it's sharing with the research chamber and the soil centrifuge are both using the power at the moment. So that's all there is to spare, is that tiny amount of power. When the soil centrifuge is finished, I believe you will actually see that yellow line get bigger because the soil centrifuge is no longer using it. Ah, good coffee. See there, it got bigger. It'll also get bigger when the wind is blowing, because that wind turbine will produce more power. But yeah, so it gives you a basic visual indication of how much power you have and how fast your machines are going to run when you turn them on. Right. Now I could make more turbines and increase the amount of power when the wind is blowing, but I happen to know that it's not really worth it at this early point in the game. So now I'm going to need a rover seat for when I've got the rover, so we might as well build that now. How close are we to the buggy? We're still about 500 away, so it'll be a little while before we've got that. So let's go underground and see what we can find. Just because. I do need to remember to bring that back up, but we'll do that later. Right, here we are. Now what was there? There was... Yes, there it is. A 44 research sample just over there. Now we actually want to keep going down. We haven't reached the level where we're going to find any resources we haven't found yet. So there is a reasonable impetus, whoa, don't want to fall in that hole, to keep descending. There are other resources that are found. Oh, there's another research sample. It's not important. There are other resources that can be found at this level that we haven't yet found, but those, I can all produce those through the soil centrifuge, so it's not a big hassle. So we're going to begin our next descent. So again, find sort of some... Start digging a hole and find something that is about the level of the ramp you want. Begin your descent. Slowly climb into it. And plant tethers on the way down. Now you'll see the color of the terrain change. When you get deep enough, the actual density, hardness of the terrain will also change. Okay, we've managed to come out into another cavern layer very quickly. Normally that doesn't happen. I've also just run out of tethers, so I'm going to have to stop to make more tethers. But I'm also going to be going directly into compound here, so that sort of has its advantages. Right, so I have to make another tether bundle. Okay, you can just, in the distance over there where my mouse pointer currently is, see a pink resource. That is quartz. But since we now make quartz through the soil centrifuge, I'm not really going to bother going over there for it. Is there anything else of use that I can see here immediately? No. But you're starting to see the next layer of terrain. That's a giant mushroom over there. Alright, so we are just gonna continue straight down through this compound chunk. Now, one of the things that did come with the automation update that I haven't looked into is there is supposed to be a more efficient way of harvesting resources. So maybe in this video we'll do that before we get to the buggy. Alright, we'll keep going down for a little bit, and then I'll start looking at... Okay, now I'm into denser terrain. I can still dig through it, but it takes longer. And I'm moonwalking my way down as well, which is quite amusing. Yeah, look, we'll descend until we find a new sort of cavern level layer, which I believe will be the giant mushroom layer. Yep, because there's a giant mushroom. Alright, so this part of the descent is always hard, because these giant mushrooms will pop up in front and around you, and you have to kind of dig them out of the way, and they are giant. Oh, I was lucky that one got out of the way pretty quickly and on its own. Yeah, this isn't a real open area where I can really demonstrate the giant mushroom biome. Sounds like I'm talking about Minecraft, the giant mushroom biome. Anyway, oh, maybe there is a bit off to the side there. No, it doesn't look like it either. What's that? That's more spherolite. So that's more zinc as well. So for now, I'm thinking I'm just going to have to keep trying to descend, and... Alright, we're kind of stuck now. I'm running into giant mushrooms. This is going to take some time to dig in and around. It's not a bad time to just return to the surface and start looking at the actual update, which was the automation update, in which you can actually automate collecting resources. I am collecting some resources here because apparently I'm digging through a node of laterite as well. Oh man, digging these mushrooms out so I can get past is going to take some time. Might almost be worth just trying to go around them. Alright, I'm going to give up on this now, and we're going to go around those mushrooms next time we return down here. But alright, we might pause our buggy research and look into the resource refiner, resource collector. I don't know what it's called yet, but apparently it's a more efficient way of gathering resources. So for every one resource you would normally be able to gather from a vein of, let's say, compound, the special automated refinery will gather a total of 15. That's really, really worth it. But I'm imagining that that's possibly going to need some rather complex resources. I don't know. So we might not be able to do it immediately because we might actually have to get off this planet before we can. We'll take this up with us. But we'll look into it and we'll see. Alright, zigzagging up the ramps because it makes you move a little bit faster if it's too steep. Place that there. There's our rover seat. We'll just put that aside for now. Alright, let's have a look and see if we can find this automation stuff. Small printer packager. No, that's normal. Okay, what a packager does, they're quite useful, and they're one of the few things that require graphite. They will take something you have unpacked and repack it, which is good if you want to move your base, or say you find a large piece of equipment out in the wilderness attached to a piece of debris. You can use a packager to package it back up into a smaller package, which is easier to move around. Very useful piece of equipment. Right, automation stuff. No, none of that is automation. None of that was, none of that was, none of that was. Medium printer, oxygenator, medium shredder. So the shredder is where you will actually place debris to produce a raw resource, which is scrap metal, that you can actually trade for other resources. Okay, an auto arm, so that's one of the first automation things that I haven't seen yet. Medium resource canister, that is also a new resource thing. So just having these resources sitting on the ground like this, well, apparently you'll be able to place them into these resource canisters, so I don't know how that works yet either. Medium soil canister, well, that actually existed before, and it is the same as the little ones on your back. It's just a bigger version of said canister. Alright, those are also part of the automation, but I don't need them. Button repeater, that's also part of the automation, but I don't think I need them yet. Yeah, I think this is going to be in the large section. Large printer, smelting furnace, soil centrifuge, chemistry lab. That's what I want to get up to. Atmospheric condenser. Shredder, blah, 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 blah. Platforms, large resource canister. Okay, that's all storage. That's the buggy. It's the medium rover. Now, the medium rover is the next one up from the buggy. It's more like the tractor, except it's got a large slot on top of it, so you can put something big on top of it, or you can put two medium things on top of it. Yeah, it's just like the tractor, it's just a little bit faster, and you can put more stuff on it. The crane is one of the things you can put on it, for example. The crane is very much like your own terrain manipulator, except it's a vehicle-mounted one. It's much bigger. I've never used it. I don't think it's an essential part of actually finishing the game. Alright, all the way up to large. Auto extractor, tungsten carbide. Alright, we're definitely not, and steel. We're definitely not going to be able to do this on this first planet, because that's going to require the chemical lab, which is this. So that's one of the next things that we're going to have to actually research, but tungsten is not found on this planet. So we're going to have to get to another planet before we can use that anyway. So down to the buggy, we now have enough, so we'll research that. That should be built through the medium printer. Yep, requires one compound, one aluminium, so we'll have to stick that on the smelter and wait for that to finish. I'm gonna fill this and make some resin, because we're almost out of resin and I could use some more resin. Just because. Grab these research samples because I can, and then just refill my canisters with dirt because it's useful to have full canisters of dirt in case you need to build a platform or something to climb in or out of something, or just to refill this. So you saw then that the soil centrifuge actually stopped. That's because recharging my backpack was using the very last vestiges of available power, and there wasn't enough left to power the machines. Your backpack takes priority over any machines or modules in your loop, in your system. Alright, let's print a buggy. So I don't think we're going to get to use that today, guys, because we're... we will get to explore a little bit with the buggy. We'll go and see if we can find some copper. Video might just be a little bit longer than otherwise required, but we've been going for about 50 minutes so far. Normally try to keep it to an hour, so I'm going to want to end up soon. But we should have enough time to at least go see if we can find any copper. We might not find it, but we're going to try to find it. The other thing is it's going to depend on the weather, because if the buggy runs out of power, I'm only going to have wind power. So if the wind doesn't blow, we're not going to be able to recharge the buggy, and we're just going to be left sitting there. But we'll see. We might get lucky. We might not. Oops. I forgot. The research chamber is now always on. It didn't used to be like that. I'm not used to that slight change. Lost on my coffee. Good coffee. Alright. So yeah, you can see the buggy's only got a double slot, and you have to use that double slot for the rover seat, because the buggy can't be attached to anything like the tractor trailer can, and you need some way of driving it. So you can't put anything else on that slot of the buggy, and the only other slots it has is on the rear of the buggy. It's got 2 single slots, which is where you will almost certainly put extra power items. One of the other things you might put on the buggy is a beacon. So a beacon, like the further I get away from my house, you see this, which gives me an indicator of where it is when I get really far away and can't see it anymore. Although it doesn't work if the thing is over the horizon. But it does work from space, so you can see it from space, so long as you're actually looking down on the point in the planet where the beacon is. So the shelter has a built-in beacon, essentially. But you might put a beacon on a buggy so you know where it is. If, for example, you die and you leave it somewhere and you don't know where you've left it and you have to go and find it, a beacon could help in that situation. But I'm not going to bother. Alright, so put it somewhere relatively safe. Unpack it. Put the rover seat on it and unpack that. And put the wind turbine on it, which charged it to that tiny little bit before the wind died. So yeah, so without a solar panel this is going to be hard because we're not going to be able to get very far. So F to enter. Like all vehicles, when you enter or exit it, it saves your game. Does have that advantage. Let's see how far we get on this much charge. I don't actually know. Oh, that will get us all the way to the mountain. So that was pretty good. And the battery's flat. Oh, but it's just got windy, so now we get a little bit more out of it. Alright, so I'm going to park sort of here-ish and get out. See, now it's full, and you can see I've got an oxygen tether, but this will not provide power to tethers because there is no oxygenator, actual oxygenator. But it does give me a point that I can return to get oxygen that isn't my base all the way back where my shelter is. And that was the point of this. So now we can explore these hills. Now, over there you'll see a black glistening thing coming off the side of the mountain. That is graphite. So like I said, graphite's pretty rare. It's found in the mountains on most, or in this first world. It's pretty hard to find. It's much easier to just produce graphite through the soil centrifuge. Alright, so we've got to get these things out of the way so they don't harm us when we're going past. Did mean I had to destroy some research samples there, but oh well, you get that. Alright, let's grab all of these research samples because waste not, what not. Alright, I think that's about all there is to get there. Let's head back to the buggy, grab some more oxygen. And power. So the buggy will power your suit as well if it is getting power. I don't believe it'll power your suit instead of itself. So for example, if the wind wasn't blowing, I don't think it'd use your battery to power your backpack. But I could be wrong about that. I don't use the buggy very often. It's not normal that I'm on a planet and I get a starting spawn where I can't get malachite, copper, the raw resource of copper, without just wandering off. There it is. So there's a big chunk of copper. So this is what we're looking for. And we're going to gather as much of this as we can before our backpack runs out of power. Thanks to the oxygen tank, it's almost certain that we'll run out of power before we run out of oxygen. Yeah, lots of this, because it's going to be a pain to have to come back here. Now, when you do entirely run out of power, it won't power your mod anymore, but you can still manipulate the terrain, albeit at a slower rate. That is basically if you get yourself into an emergency situation where you're like stuck down a hole or something and you need to build yourself a ramp out. The game doesn't sort of mean, okay, now you're stuck and you're dead because you can't manipulate the terrain. So you could still do a little bit of terrain manipulation, just not a lot. Okay, I'm full now. I can't actually fit anything more in my backpack, so that'll do it. We'll return and we'll head back to base with all this lovely copper. Yeah, so it doesn't recharge your backpack. The buggy will not recharge your backpack as instead of its own batteries. Alright. Return home. Avoiding all the pitfalls in the terrain. Leave the buggy sort of here. I'm actually going to take this off because it is more useful on my base at the moment. Oh yes, I mentioned RTGs before. This is a small RTG. It's not unsocketable. You can't take it off the base, but it is an RTG, and that is how the shelter produces a basic amount of electricity at all times, is that it has this built-in RTG. Very, very late in the game, you can actually build new shelters. Alright, now we've got copper, so now we can build solar panels, which, in my opinion, is essential for moving on to the next planet. So I should already have enough research points, yes, to research the solar panel, which should be here. Small solar panels, so we will smelt some malachite into copper. On my backpack I will find oxygen filter, small canister, small generator, beacon, work light, small oxygen tank, small solar. Oh yes, I wouldn't mind a small work light as well, so we'll smelt 2 copper in fact. So I'll do a small solar and I'll show you what that looks like and how it works, and then I'll show you the work light, which is also extremely useful. Now the work light doesn't have to be in one of these tool slots like I explained. The oxygen tank also doesn't have to be in one of these tool slots, like a power generator like the wind turbine or the small solar does to actually provide power to the backpack. But I tend to put the work light up there because then it provides light in a greater radius because it points upwards. If you put it on your backpack, it actually points... In fact, let's make that first, just because. It points straight backwards and provides light in a weird sort of area. Alright, so now we can make a work light. We'll do this first just because I'm talking about it and I want to demonstrate. So if I put it here on the backpack, it actually produces light behind me. It doesn't produce light in front of me. Whereas if I put it on the top tool slot, it produces light in a circle around me, well, a sphere around me. So it's much more useful up there. Again, the oxygen tank also doesn't need to be up there, but I like it up there because it's more visible. It's just easier to see. Alright, small solar is the next thing we're going to want. Take the small oxygen tank off for the sec. See, so like you can see it there on your backpack, but it's just not as easy to recognize as if it was on the top. But now that I put the small solar up there, it's now currently working. It's now tracking the sun. It'll track the sun as you rotate around, and it'll charge your batteries. It, like the small wind turbine, can be placed on the ground and hooked up via cable. Works perfectly well like that. You'll see the, if you watch this cable here, the amount of energy provided, if I now unclip this, it actually gets smaller. And it can also fit into a single slot where it also provides power. So I'll put one of those on the small shelter, just for now. So it's good we've got those because we need those 2 basic power supplying modules for when we get off planet, because we won't have a shelter when we get off planet. We'll only have our spaceship, which provides a tiny bit of power and can only provide that power to you. It cannot provide it to tables or modules. So to power any equipment on the next planet that we visit, we're going to need some sort of power producing modules, which in our case is going to be the small solar and the small wind turbine. But that's definitely going to be in our well, hopefully in our next video we'll get far enough to actually get off this planet. But that's going to do it for this video, so thank you very much for watching, guys. I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit that like button. If you'd like to see more of my content, hit that subscribe button. That'll make it nice and easy to find the channel. If you'd like to get notifications, hit that bell icon. If you didn't like the video, hit that dislike button. That's what it's for. But if you didn't, I would appreciate a comment. Let me know what it was about the video that you didn't like so that maybe I can improve in the future. Thanks very much, and we'll see you in the next one.